Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Today, we'd like to welcome you to today's session, Getting Started in Manga, Developing Your Library's Collection. Our presenter is Emily Radica, teacher librarian at Arroyo Valley High School in the San Bernardino City Unified School District. Emily, thank you so much, and we look so forward to learning from you today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here and talk to you about some manga. I'm gonna try and rush through. Now I feel a little frazzled because we ran late, and I planned to have more time, but that's okay. Um, and so if anybody has any questions or wants to just like speak up or whatever, I'm here to talk about manga. And so if you have any questions at all, please do so. So I have my presentation link on the screen in front of you, and I also have the Jamboard link. If you want to click on or go to there, there's the first two slides are just like talking about your own experience with manga. So if you want to take a second, I'm going to kind of jump back and forth between the two. So I'm sorry if I'm jumping back and forth, but here's the Jamboard. If you want to just go on there and do a little sticky note of your own experience with manga, even if it's just like, this is the first time I've heard of it. What is this sorcery that you speak of type thing? I just, I want to hear about where you guys are with your own personal experience. So let me so feel free to do that. But yeah, my name is Emily. I've been a teacher librarian for this is my 5th year. I've been in education for 13 years. I was an English teacher before that. Um, and my own personal experience with manga is not impressive. Okay, I have super imposter syndrome when it comes to manga because I don't like to read manga. Okay, I don't enjoy reading it. I don't. I just don't get it. It's really hard for me to read. Um, but I love having it in my library. And I think that it's an essential part of it should be an essential part of every library collection. So you don't have to like reading manga in order to have it in your library. You don't even have to know a whole lot about manga to have it in your library. So hopefully this session will kind of answer some questions or get you started on creating your own collection. So let me Oh, and thank you for putting those in the chat. Um, I'm not using Google Slides, but thank you. Okay, so let's get started really quickly here. So this is just really to help you develop your library's collection and getting started in manga. If you are like you've been reading manga your whole life and you know all the characters on this screen, then great. This is going to be kind of a you already know situation. But if in the chat, guys, if you know any of these characters, put it in the chat. Who are these guys? Take a second. These are some really popular characters. There's some Pokemon. Thank you. Teacher, recognize the Pokemon. Avatar. There's Sailor Moon. Yes, good job. Yes, thank you. Naruto. There's one. Deku. There we go. Naruto, you got spelling right. Who's Avatar? I'm curious who people think Avatar is. Death Note. Close. The bald kid. Nope, that's not Avatar. That one. Nobody's got that. The other ones you guys have got right. Here's our Pokemon, of course. Everybody knows the Pokemon. Here's Naruto, Sailor Moon, One Piece. One Piece right here. Yes, it's from One Piece. Tokyo Ghoul. Thank you, Nicole. Tokyo Ghoul. This guy right here. One Punch Man. Richard got it. Thank you. One Punch Man. Okay. So good. With collective wisdom here, we could pick out some of these characters. And yes, this is from My Hero Academia up here on the top. So if these titles are things you've never heard of, then you're in the right place. And if you don't know any of these characters, that's okay because I didn't know any of these characters either. Okay, and you don't necessarily have to know their names. Okay, that's not important for having them in your library. So, what is manga? And it is pronounced manga. I always review that with people because I said it wrong to the head of Viz Media, and Viz Media is like the biggest publisher. Um, Viz Media is one of the biggest publishers in manga, and I said manga, and he was like, "Excuse me," and it was so embarrassing. It was at Comic Con, and I was just like, "Oh, my sister-in-law loves manga," and he was like, "It's manga," and it was very embarrassing. So, um, yeah, it's pronounced manga, so just FYI. But basically, manga is just a style of Japanese comic books and graphic novels, typically aimed at all levels, children, adults. There's lots of different kinds, so we'll go over that. I'm going to show this really quick clip from My Hero Academia. This is um, one of the most popular titles or anime out right now. And the manga is hugely popular as well. I'm just going to show a little very brief. You don't have to know any of the like backstory here, but just very brief, um, uh, like 30 seconds here. And while we're watching it, just no, just look at the characteristics of this anime. What does it look like? What does it sound like? What does the artwork look like? Okay, and think about what would appeal to your students. All right. So just in the chat, or if somebody wants to speak up, that's fine as well. What are some characteristics that you saw that might appeal to your students? The fire. A lot of action, of course, the conflict, okay, the good versus evil, the drama, the artwork. Yes, the artwork especially, it's so bright and vivid, and it's very, very dramatic. You watch like 20 seconds, and if you've never seen 40 seconds, if you've never seen anime in your life, congratulations, here's some anime. But yes, it's very dramatic, the dramatic voiceover, right? um and it was in a different language, right? And was it engaging for you just watching those 40 seconds? If anybody else, anything else? Okay, those 40 seconds, it's engaging for our students, and it's something that's become hugely popular in the United States. So if we have this anime that's hugely that's but rolling my eyes, it's hugely popular, then as librarians we need to have the be able to access it, right, and make it available to our students, and that's through manga. Okay, keep going here. So here are some different types of manga. These are not all of the different types. These are the ones that you'll see more of for your students. The first, Kodomo. And again, I'm going to mispronounce these, and I'm sorry because I look them up every time, and I always and I always forget and I mispronounce it. So if I mispronounce it, sorry. Um, but Kodomo, it's the target demographic is children, right? Little ones, elementary readers. Chi Sweet Home is a great one. I know somebody up in the chat said that finding stuff for young readers is difficult, but there is stuff out there. Chi Sweet Home is a great one. It's very cute. Pokemon is always a classic that all grade levels love, not just little kids, but it's definitely one like my own, my 8 and my 11-year-old boys, and my 6-year-old, my 4-year-old girls. They love Pokemon. Um, Fluffy Cinnamon Roll is another really cute one that's good for that age demographic. Shonen. So shonen is the ones that are they're targeted a little bit older, but they're still not release inappropriate stuff in them. They're like 10 and up ish. There's lots of cinematic action, straightforward artwork. My Hero Academia falls in that category. Dragon Ball is another one, of course, that is hugely popular, and there's tons and tons and tons of Dragon Ball out there. This is a really big category, and we'll talk about some more titles that fit into this. Um, Shoujo is um, a little bit more targeted toward females, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute too. But it's created for girls like 10 and up. Well, I'm not going to say it's created for girls. It's just created for again a little bit older. Um, Good question, Rebecca. I'll get to that in a second. Um, but it kind of deviates from more the action adventure. It still has that, but it also explores more romance, like psychological issues. Um, and that kind of thing, like Sailor Moon, Fruits Basket. those are both within that category. So Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z are related. Um, they're not the same exact thing, but they're like the next generation. It's like they grew up and had kids, and then there's like they're all just connected. So that's Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. You'll see all the same characters ish, and you get more characters. So both are very popular. Then you get into the kind of older categories, and I always mispronounce this one. I'm sorry. Seinen. You pronounce it how you want. I have students that correct me, and I let them correct me. It's one of their favorite things to do. They're like, "Oh, this is this category," and they're like, "No, Mrs. Radica, it's this." Oh, excuse me. I love it when students correct me because it seinen. Thank you. Seinen. Thank you. I love being corrected by students because it shows that they care enough, right? So I love it when they correct me. This is there's a lot more violence. There's darker tones. There's more adult content, and it's a little bit more graphic. Akira is a very popular one. A popular one in my own library is Monster. I wouldn't recommend those for middle school. I would definitely recommend those for high school because they do get a little bit more heavy and graphic. Middle schools, I would say stick to these categories. And then Josai, somebody want to correct me again? This definitely features more mature themes, more exploration and romance and personal relationships. Um, but it can get a little bit more explicit. Um, and can get to like borderline like nakedness happening. So these ones I don't really have a ton of these. I in my own library I have like two that fall under this, and I'm really careful about who checks them out because they can be a little bit more explicit. So I was just about to say any other questions. There this is pretty much publishers have their own ratings, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. But these categories are pretty standard. Okay, what falls within them changes a little bit, but these are like categories of manga that publishers stick to. But let me go on and talk about the ratings because it's a good question. Because content ratings, especially for us as librarians, we of course have to be careful a little bit more, and if you have younger readers, then you have to be even more careful, right? So these are two like here's Viz Media's content rating. And they have four categories. They have the all ages that, something like Pokemon, right? Then they have teen, like early teens are okay. Like I'd say those are okay for middle school and older. Um, it's got maybe some violence, some strong language, but nothing that's gonna like maybe like you'll see somebody like drinking or something like that, but nothing that's like really explicit. There's Teen Plus. Now these ones are like your older teens, adults. It's going to have way more violence. It's going to have sexual content. Most of the time, it doesn't have nudity. I don't think I've seen a Teen Plus with nudity, but again, I haven't read everything out there. But they're much closer to that nudity than like it's got like very carefully positioned hair type thing. Um, and the mature is just adults only. So um, another rating by who is this by? This was Kodansha uh, Comics. They're another big publisher. They have very similar ratings. They have like an all ages youth rating. They have a T that's like 13 plus. You could probably go a little bit lower than 13, like 12, middle school readers, an older teen, and then the mature. Most of the time on the back of the on the back of the book, you will see the rating. Actually, here, let me show you. Can you guys see me? Hi, look, there's me. Hi. So like this is Attack on Titan. Oh, can you see it with my background? Hold on, let me get rid of my background. Oh. You guys are gonna see how big a nerd I am. Because behind me is I'm in my husband's game room. And look, there's all his games. I was trying to do it with my library, but you'll just get this. So here is Attack on Titan. And on the back cover, you can see, there we go. Here's the rating. So most of the time, you can see the rating on the back of the kids. Yeah, and My Hero Academia, that's like a middle school, that's like a questionable middle school one, like Jason's saying. There are some points, actually. Let me show you. Did I bring the My Hero? Haha, okay. This one um is the back of My Hero Academia. Do you see how I've cleverly placed my barcode? It's because she's wearing some very questionable underwear, and so I just covered it with my barcode. But throughout the book, there are some moments where you see a little bit more that could be, objectionable to some parents. So that's you have to decide what's best for you and for your students. So that's a decision that you have to make. I'm not necessarily worried about it in my high school, but there are some things on my shelf that I think, okay, maybe this one's a little bit too much. Um, okay, but we'll get more into talking about that in a second. Okay, so just a quick note, especially for the people who have not really read or know anything about manga, is that oftentimes people talk about it like it's backwards, because the book is read different than how we're used to reading it in the West. It's Japanese comics, so instead of being um, left to right like we read, manga reads right to left. Okay? And you flip the book over again. Here, I'll show my screen here. So here's my Attack on Titan, right? So instead of being, there we go, like a book that we're used to here in the West, it's opposite. Okay? It's different than how we read it. And I've often had students and teachers say like, "Oh, this is backwards." Like, "Oh yeah, you read this backwards." But that word itself connotes that it's wrong, right? We use the word backwards, be like, "Oh, their thinking is backwards." So as librarians, we need to be thoughtful about how we use our language, because one of the best parts about manga is that it opens students up to a completely different culture and a different experience than they would get from a Western printed book. And so I always make a point of, when I hear kids say like, "Oh, you read this backwards," I'm like, "No, no, it's not backwards. It's not backwards for people in Japan. It's just a different way of approaching it." And it's a different way of reading. And so when students read manga, they're not only reading and everything that comes with that, but they're also experiencing things differently. Um, okay, so that's a good question, Amber, and actually that goes right perfectly into this little graphic I have here. So here is like a typical page of text for a manga, right? So normally we'd start here, right? Like for us, we'd start here and we're like, "Oh, this is where we start." But notice here we've got this panel right here, this little box. You start here with A and then go to B. So yeah, you read left. We normally read left to right, but here we read right to left. So I actually think, and this goes back to me reading a manga, the reason I don't like to read manga is because it's really, really difficult for me. Okay. I have never been a reluctant reader or a difficult. I've been reading my whole life, right? I picked up a manga and I was like, "I can't read this." I've never been a struggling reader before until I read manga. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't read this. It's so hard." Maybe I'm too old. Maybe my brain's not trained enough, but it's so hard for me to read it. So then when students read it and they read it so quickly and they love it and they can talk about it in depth, I am blown away, because the amount of work it takes and the inference it takes to read manga, it's a lot of work. So I get really upset when people are like, "Oh, but that's not really reading," or "They're not reading very much." I'm like, dude, you have no freaking clue how much work it takes to read this for somebody who um for somebody who's never read it before, or for somebody who may be considered a reluctant reader. They're getting into this. So that's how you read. They've got it to like, here's one, A, B, here's two, A, B, here's three, A, B, C, D, E. So you can follow the progression. Okay. So but yes, thank you for your comments. It's definitely important to remember that our language and how we speak is important, because that reflects or our students pick that up. Okay? Also, another thing to note is that the creators created this and their artwork is intentional. So we need to follow with what the creator did, because they did that for a reason. Now, sometimes English translations are flipped so that the book can read left to right. And let me show you another example that I brought. Um, Here is Maximum Ride. You guys know this one? James Patterson, Maximum Ride. There's a manga. Okay. Technically, it's James Patterson. It's not, originally written in from Japan. So this book actually reads right to left, or left to right, excuse me, in the more traditional way that you're used to. So this book it doesn't follow the same. It doesn't follow the same structure. Yeah, Maximum Ride is a huge hit. I have like 3 copies of this manga in my library because it's constantly checked out. But sometimes you'll see that as well. Okay, moving along here. Any other questions? I thank you guys. You've been so like. Sorry, hold on. Okay, so we're going into why buy manga. I actually really don't like this discussion because like we should buy manga because kids want to read it, right? And I shouldn't have to like justify why I buy what I buy. But we all don't live in that world. We always have to be able to support the reasons behind why we do what we do, not just because we're like, well, I'm a professional and I know what I'm doing, right? So I'm gonna show you this little video. While I have the video playing, if you have access to the Jamboard, there's a couple of slides on there for pros and cons. If you want to go in there and like any pros or cons that you can think of for why having manga in your library is a good thing or bad thing, you can add those on there. So this video is very short. It's of One Punch Man. One Punch Man is a great manga. It's about a superhero that doesn't look very much like a superhero to begin with, but he's so strong that he can't find anybody that he could like actually fight with because he's so strong. Like one punch takes out all of his adversaries, right? So this is his hero test when he was first being, trying to become a hero. And as we watch this again, think about why it would appeal to your students, right? What makes it so interesting for your students to watch? I love the whack-a-mole one. It's like punching whack-a-mole. It makes me laugh every time. So again, just in the chat, what appeals to your students? Why would this be such a huge hit? And One Punch Man it's a huge hit. But what about it makes it so appealing to your students? The power behind him, absolutely. It's so extreme. The competitive aspect of things, absolutely. I love the guys at the end. At first they're like, oh, look at this little nobody, he's all bald and skinny, and then they're like, their eyes get all big. Definitely a comedy element. The feeling powerful when they're feeling powerless. um yeah, the underestimating them, a lot of kids probably relate to the idea of being underestimated. um yeah, you don't have to have like a whole bunch of information. The context, it makes sense. Even this little clip that you guys saw, the unique body shape. He's bald and unusual amongst all of these other different types of heroes. So it's definitely appealing to our students because they can relate in so many different ways, even though it may be different culturally. There's so many things that they pick up on. um, and I'm going to talk about that, Karina. We'll talk about that in a second. Excellent question, though. So there's just so much there for students to love. So why don't we as librarians tap into that and bring them into the library using their passion and their love for something that maybe we don't necessarily get 100%. Okay, so some of the pros and cons that I've encountered and I've had people talk to as I've talked to people. Let's start with some of the pros, right? They're they're great, and all graphic novels are fantastic for promoting visual literacy and inference skills. If you've ever tried to pick up a manga and read it, there's so much inference that goes into it, because especially with a manga, there's like 4 or 5 things happening all at once. You know, you've got the main storyline, and there's like a dream sequence, or they have like little chibis happening in the corner, or there's so many things going on that it takes a lot of inference, and you have to pick up a lot from the visual as well. There's a high interest and high circulation with manga. Anybody who has manga in their library is gonna they're gonna pretty much, and anybody in the chat, if you disagree with me, please let me know. But your manga are probably hugely are huge in terms of circulation, um, because they're just massively popular. Um, Thank you. Yeah, never have to reshelve. They're very popular. I agree. Can't keep them always on the shelf. They're always checked out. So that, you know, if you've got so many kids wanting them, then why not provide what they want? I also love it because it's popular across different, you know, our genders. There's girls who read boy, quote unquote, boy manga, and boys who read quote unquote girl manga. There's no boy or girl that like, oh, you read this, oh, that's a girl book, right? They just, gender doesn't really matter as much when it comes to manga. And I love that because like, oh, hey, you want to read Sailor Moon, dude? Cool, Sailor Moon is awesome, right? So they're very popular depending on, regardless of what gender your reader. Yeah, absolutely, I agree, Kara. Just so many girls, so many boys are just well loved despite, you know, the stereotype that goes with them. They're also very diverse and inclusive, especially for LGBTQ. There are a lot of really great LGBTQ manga out there. And there's, I don't know, there's just not as much stigma, I feel like, within the characters that we get sometimes with our American comics, which I'll talk about more in my next session about comics. But they're just very diverse and inclusive. And again, it's a way to like tap into a different culture. You know, I have the majority of my school are Hispanic and African American. It's actually all of my school, and you know, Hispanic girls especially, they love reading this manga. We will talk about Death Note too. Karina, you're full of good questions. They can also play the role as gateway reads that lead to more reading, and they're just beloved, right? They're just beloved. And if you talk to any teen about manga, they will just go on and on and on, which is kind of why I don't feel bad about not knowing a lot about manga, because I just ask my students and they will talk about it for hours, right? I'll just talk and talk and talk. Oh my gosh, I'm so out of time. Okay, so some of the cons, it is very intimidating to an outsider. And I read some of your experiences and all of you're like, oh, I don't know what else to do, or this is so scary. Um, there are just so many. Where do I start? There's so much money, the paperbacks, how do I justify it, and how do I make enough space? So you can go through this. This is 2019 manga sales. Okay, huge manga sales. Um, this was from January 2020. Superheroes are actually down um, in terms of publishing, but manga is up 25% year over year growth. So it is, and you can see here they have like a little map of where the growth is. Los Angeles, California, look at San Francisco, California, huge growth for manga readers. Okay, so it's just growing all over the place. Sorry, I'm going through this really fast. This is my own collection. I don't have this last year because I closed in March, and so I don't have my last year's circulation stats. But the orange line, or the blue line, is how many manga I had in my library. When I started, there was one manga, and then as I got more money, like I didn't have a budget that year, but then I had a budget this year, and then I got more, and then I got more. I didn't have a budget last year, so I couldn't add any more. But as I've added more manga, I've gone from them being checked out 4 times for that first year I was there to being almost 3,000 times checked out in a year. So I've had explosive circulation stats for my manga. I'm sorry, I'm going so fast through this. So gateway reads, right? Trying to get to your questions. Gateway reads, these are actually um, light novels. They're actual books that, like traditional novel prose books that go along with a story. So like if your kids Tokyo Ghoul love Tokyo Ghoul, these are prose novels that go with the manga as well. So if people are like, oh, kids are reading real books, you're like, you know what? First of all, yes, they are real books. And I put this prose novel right next to their manga, and this gets read just as much as Tokyo Ghoul, which is one of the favorites in my library. Um, all right. And I'm going to get to your questions, guys. I'm sorry, give me just a second. So, manga related, there's tons of manga related stuff. Uh, they have Manga Classics has like a whole bunch of, they take classics and they turn them into manga. They just put out, I mean, they put out stuff constantly. They just put out Macbeth. There's a really cute Anna Green Gables. I have a whole series called the Manga Guide 2, and it's all nonfiction. It's also really cool. Kids see it and they're like, oh, that's cool. And they love to read it. They have lots of different subject areas. There's also tons of like manga drawing. These are another category. I cannot keep these on my shelf. I have high schoolers, and you think they wouldn't be excited about like drawing manga monsters, but they are. They love these books. So I can't keep these ones on the shelf. So if you want to try and expand maybe into more like nonfiction or whatever, check out some of the stuff that they have there. They're hugely popular. It's like a senior in high school and he's like drawing manga and he loves it. It's like great, go for it. Okay, so this goes back to the question about publishers and how to purchase. So one of the biggest things that I could advise for people who are starting to develop their own manga collection is to purchase a variety of different styles. Because again, like they don't, girls don't stick to girl books, and boys don't stick to boys books. That doesn't work, especially with manga. You know, they don't stick to those stereotypical gender lines. The best thing to do is to ask your students for feedback. I always have a list that sits with my manga collection, and it's like, hey, recommend manga to me. And that list will get filled up once a week of kids who want to read manga. So, and I'm going to talk about shelving too. Um, they tell me what they want, and then I go through and I look at it and I'm like, okay, this doesn't really work, or this does work, and I'll let them know too, like, hey, this is a little bit too adult, and they're like, they think they're so cool because they're reading like more adult manga. I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't get that, but I can get this. Many series are super long. I learned this lesson with One Piece. I have the first like 60 of One Piece, way too long. Okay, I had one student who read through the entire thing, but it's only been read through like twice. I've had way more people read the first 10 of One Piece. So I wish I had purchased more than one copy of the first 10. Okay, Tokyo Ghoul. Tokyo Ghoul is hugely popular in my library. Um, yeah, the first and it's not a super long series, it's 20, but I have 3 copies of the first 10 because the first like 3 4 5, those are the ones that get checked out the most. My Hero Academia, I have 4 copies of number 1, and I cannot keep that on the shelf. I don't have it like the rest of the entire series because kids, they lose interest, or maybe they don't want to read the whole thing or whatever. So if you have kids that show like a lot of interest in one series, then yeah, buy more in that series. But if you're just starting out, get the first 3 or 5 of that series. Yeah, perfect. Nicole says like buy the first 5 and see how those do, and then purchase more based on popularity, right? But be prepared.
Excuse
Okay, sorry.
excuse me, Emily.
Oh,
We have about 4 minutes.
oh my gosh. Okay, I'm sorry. So yeah, purchase in small amounts and see how they do. Um, Here's some recommendations. The top ones are the most popular for this last year. I know, I'm so sorry. And then the bottom ones are the ones that are more popular in my own library. Let me talk about questions that I got. Um, because if you look, hold on. Okay, so covers. Okay, hold, let me regroup. Um, Shelving. If you have not pulled out your manga for their own shelving, I really recommend you do so. This right here, this whole shelf is manga. Okay, I have over 600 titles that is just their own collection. Okay, this didn't happen overnight. This took a long time to get there, but I highly recommend that you put them on their own because they are going to get so much circulation um, on their own. And if you want to talk to me more about this, totally talk to me. I created their own call number because, why not? There's more about promotion and craft stuff. Something that I do that was really popular when I showed it at CSLA last year is I make manga bookmarks. I get, your manga gets torn up, especially the paperbacks. So instead of just tossing them, I cut them up. Actually, I have a TA cut them up. I have a TA cut them up, and then I give them out to students and they color them and then we laminate them, and they have their own manga bookmarks, and they love them. They're the silliest little thing, but they're so popular in my library. Yes, my library is genrefied. It took me a long time to get there. And I got rid of my reference collection. But what I wanted to get to was in this drive, I have in my drive, I have a bunch of resources about manga, more information. And if you, well, there's a lot of different lists. I don't have a ton of recommendations because I think that your students are a better source of recommendations than I am. But there's a ton of Sarah Smith, of course, and her graphic library. She she's a great resource, and I'd recommend following Viz Media and some other of the big publishers on Twitter, because they're going to put out more information about different levels of manga. So, okay, I'm done talking. Are there any other questions? See, I
Wow,
buy.
so much to learn and enjoy and share. And
What vendors do I like for manga? I buy a lot from Permabound and Follett. Sometimes I know we shouldn't do this, but sometimes I spend my own money because I go to Comic-Con, and if I can find some like good used stuff, I will spend some of my own money and buy used stuff from like different used books, like different booksellers, just around. That's terrible advice. Don't do that. But there definitely are vendors. I like Permabound and I like Follett because they will rebind. Mackin also rebinds, and that's nice because then you have a harder cover. Thank you. You have a harder cover for your book, and it lasts longer. Okay.
thank,
Oh, sorry. I know our time's up. I'm
thank,
done.
I
So
apologize.
excited.
Thank you so much, Emily, for such a wealth of information on manga. And thank you all of you for attending. And it is amazing. I completely agree. And if you want to unmute and thank her, please do. And then enjoy your next session.
Thanks, Emily.
Thank you, everybody. Talk to me in Discord. I'm in Discord. Email me, whatever, if you have questions. I'm sorry I couldn't get to all of them, but thank you and bye.
Great idea. Please continue this conversation in Discord. Thank you.
Emily.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye. Thank you,
Emily.
guys.